Hi guys, Akiba back for another episode of the SlateCast. Today we're going to be talking all about Algorand with John Woods, the CTO of the foundation. So I'm going to run the intro and then we're going to get straight into it. See you guys in a sec. Okay, let's bring John in. John, how are you doing?
Akiva, how's it going? Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for coming on. Especially at the moment. I mean, I'm flooded with interviews at the moment, trying to just piece together what people's thoughts are of the industry at the moment. I mean, before we get into Algorand, some of the questions I've got there, how are you feeling about the state of the industry right now?
Well, I think obviously it's hurt a lot of people. And so, just like the global financial crisis, when institutions go bust, or when people are made debtors of financial institutions, it really hurts. It hurts retail investors, it hurts corporate investors and venture capitalists. So it hurts everyone across the entire spectrum. And when things like this happen, just like in traditional finance, I think it shakes consumer confidence in the industry generally, and that's
Sure.
natural. Although I'm I'm um, I'm still really optimistic about the crypto industry, and I'll tell you why. Crypto is a token of credit, and unlike maybe some fiat currencies that are backed by sovereign debt, Bitcoin, Monero, Algorand, Cardano, Ethereum, these tokens don't have a sovereign debt associated with them. Of course, when things happen like the recent collapse of centralized exchanges, this damages the price in the markets, of course, and it damages consumer confidence. But ultimately, it doesn't change the fundamentals. And the fundamentals
Mhm.
are these cryptocurrencies, or these, what I like to think of them as, decentralized, self-sovereign, internet native tokens of credit, okay, which are programmable, and provide the infrastructure to have a global banking system for everyone. Um, I think that dream, or that ideology, is still very much alive and well. And so, whilst it may take a little bit of time for the market to recover, just similar to what happened with the global financial crisis, or indeed something I know a bit more about, the kind of dot-com bubble. Okay, so just like it took a little while for Apple and Amazon and the others to recover from that downturn, I suspect that we're going to see a recovery, and indeed the flourishing of this industry.
I mean, I hope so. I mean, in all honesty, I expect this bear market to be painful. Like after the amount of excess liquidity just in the global markets in general, like everyone was comparing the boom that we had to the dot-com bubble and said it was going to come crashing down. And I think it was naive to think that we weren't going to get a downturn in some aspects. And obviously, global factors have played into that. Bitcoin is more correlated with the S&P than it's ever been before. So it's really hard to, I think, separate the signal from the noise in terms of the underlying infrastructure at the moment.
Sure.
When you go to all like every event that I go to, builders don't care about price. Builders don't care about what's going on. They're just building. So,
Yeah.
what's something within the ecosystem that to you can sort of that backs up that thesis? If you agree with me on that, which from the nod of your head, I assume that you do.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, I think if you look at, and again, I should kind of check myself. I'm the CTO at the foundation, so my job is chief of technology, and so really, my core skill set is all in terms of the tech that we use, the applied
Hmm.
cryptography, the engineering, the distributed systems. So I'm not a markets guru or a financial advisor, but of course, I look at these things, and they are important to some degree. So when I look at the global market capitalization, and for folks who may or may not know, market capitalization is where you take an asset, whether it's a share or a coin, and you multiply it by the number of shares or the number of coins, you get what is thought of as the kind of total worth of an asset. So the market capitalization, so all the coins multiplied by all of the prices multiplied by all of the issue, all of the coins that are out there, that comes to a big number, and that number is around kind of $800 billion or so. And that sounds like a lot, but if you start thinking in terms of trillions of dollars, you look at US debt, and that's in, I don't know what it is now, but 20-30 trillion dollars. You look at precious metals, so things like gold and tin and lead and other things like that are out there. They're 20-30 trillion dollars. And so crypto as a whole is still sub 1 trillion, right? It's less than a trillion. So it's way less than what gold is worth at 11
at the moment. We got to 1.3.
Yeah, sure. But I guess my point is that if you compare it to the other big financial verticals of precious metals or derivatives or other asset classes out there, it's still a drop in the bucket. So, and what I mean by that is not to diminish it, but rather to say there's so much more room for growth here. And although people might have said, "Oh, it's a bubble," or it's growing too fast, because of course the unit price of things like Bitcoin did look high at $60,000. But it's not about the unit price, of course. It's about the global market capitalization. So if you look at that and you don't think in terms of whether an algo is 10 cent or 20 cent or $1 or $5, but if you look at the global value of crypto, it's still really quite small compared to traditional markets, and that's why I'm quite confident it will grow. And by the way, I should say I'm confident it will grow because it has utility. And so now let me come on to the question, which is, price doesn't really matter to builders. People who are out there right now who are paving the way for this industry to flourish over the next 5 to 10 years. This is very similar to people who are during the dot-com bust. Folks didn't down tools, right? They invented new languages. They started. They were working on compilers. They were working on web technologies and frameworks. They were working on things like the iPhone, of course. So people didn't just say, "Oh well, that's the end of computers." People kept working, and so that is the same thesis or ethos that I have. So I can tell you right now, at the foundation, on a day-to-day basis, the price doesn't kind of factor into my thinking. What factors into my thinking is, how can we educate people on this stuff? How can I make the developer experience better? And of course, for the developer experience, we're going to be launching in Q1 next year, Q1 2023, AlgoKit. And AlgoKit is our next generation Algorand developer tool suite. So it's a one-stop shop for developing smart contracts and applications on the Algorand blockchain. And it's going to be super fun to use. It's going to be a developer tool you actually enjoy using.
So is this a special SDK, or is it more than that? Or
absolutely. So it's so as people will probably know, Algorand isn't just a money system where you can hold coins and move coins and send money between people, but it's also programmable. So you can write applications that live on the Algorand blockchain and execute smart contracts, decentralized exchanges, and many cool technologies. And so in order to express that logic, in order to kind of write the code and write those applications and put them on the chain, you need to use an SDK, as you mentioned, which is a software development kit. So a set of tools that you build applications with. And there are many of these, right? They exist for Windows, they exist for Mac, they exist for Linux. And so we have one dedicated to Algorand. Right now, it's pretty good. But what I'm doing with AlgoKit and what the team are doing at the foundation is taking the next step. We want to get the developer tools not to just be okay, but to be fun to use, just like they are for modern technologies, such as when you're building an iPhone app or when you're building an Android app. You have a great experience. The entire flow from an idea to build, to test, to deploy, it's visual, it's intuitive with these platforms. And so we need to get Algorand development into that same space. The language is improving, the abstractions are improving, so you can think less about low-level stuff and more about high-level stuff and how your application works. We're going to have testing frameworks which are visual, interactive, simulators, so you can play with your app offline before you even put it on chain and see how it performs. Cool. These types of things are going to make the UX great.
So, I mean, one of the core differences, I think, though, you're talking about, say, traditional dev kits and sort of Web 2 is they're all built, in the most part, obviously is open source software out there, but in the most part from centralized entities. And there's been a little bit of pushback recently. I covered an article about 4 weeks ago where you had a debate with, I believe it was Justin Bonds on Twitter, around the potential centralized nature of Algorand. And there's been a couple of articles recently saying that sort of large holders own over 99% of the tokens. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to discuss the decentralized nature of Algorand, where it's at, and how important it is. Because one of the things that I would just like to add, regardless of what your answer may be, is I'm also personally a believer that an element of centralization is needed in the earlier stages of a project. I do think it's very difficult to have a fully decentralized DAO ecosystem from day one, because building through committee, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm saying it's very difficult. And if you've got a really good team building out something, the plan is to increase its decentralization over time. For me personally, that's not actually off-putting as long as the roadmap's clear and the structure is transparent. I'm not saying that that's what you're doing, but I just wanted to add some sort of clarity in terms of, for me, in terms of a growing project, what it means to be decentralized and the importance of it.
Sure, absolutely. It's a great question. I think there's a bunch there to pick apart. So there's a philosophical question, there's a practical kind of question there. So let me kind of just, so this is more like a stream of consciousness, but I'll try to address the core kind of questions there and give people some view into what I'm thinking. And so I would start off by saying decentralization is super important. It's like one of the most important tenets of what we're doing. If we, and in fact, I would go as far as to say that if we don't manage to do this in a decentralized way, there's no point in it. That's how important it is. So it is fundamental that we get to a place where we're decentralized. I think as well, decentralization is not a binary thing. It's not like you are, you aren't. It's like a spectrum, probably like most things in life. You know, are you angry? Maybe a little. So I think right now we're reasonably decentralized. And so there's parts of it that really we're doing great in, and there's other parts like the relays, as Justin mentioned, I think somewhat fairly, somewhat unfairly, that we could do better in. So I'll pick a part where I feel like we're doing great in decentralization and where we could improve.
Sure.
But again, you know, I think it's like achieving enlightenment. It's like a journey towards complete decentralization. And just to go back to your point, I feel like you're right. You know, it's not something that you can't just like, even if you take Bitcoin, it was written by Satoshi, whoever that person is. And so the white paper was written by Satoshi. And then of course it was implemented. And at that point, it was one mind, one human, or maybe Satoshi is a group of people, but let's take it on the premise that it is one person. It was signed by one person. And that created that whole notion, right? And so that's a form of centralization. And then, you know, I agree with you. You need stewards of the project. So like, even if you take Bitcoin, there are, like, as far as I understand, and I haven't been involved actively in developing or looking at the development of Bitcoin in I guess a while, but there's probably a core bunch of folks that have access to merge PRs and Bitcoin Core and are stewards of the project. I don't know how many there are. I suspect it's not hundreds or thousands, but more like tens. And so I think you do need stewards of the project. You do need a group of people to get to kind of direct building, because if you try to do everything by committee, I don't think you end up in necessarily a great place. All that said, decentralization is core to my philosophy. It's core to the philosophy of the Inc. who are developing the protocol. And if you look at, say, consensus, which is a very important aspect of decentralization, and consensus is, for folks who may not be completely aware, the production of blocks which contain new transactions, the processing of transactions on the network, and the verification of those transactions. So I think we're in a very decentralized place with regard to the core mechanism of consensus. So using the VRF, so the verifiable random function, which is a mathematical primitive or cryptographic primitive, which is at the heart of our consensus protocol. If you compare that to proof of work or other forms of proof of stake, like delegated proof of stake, I feel that the pure proof of stake mechanism, this idea that we select someone from the sea of participants to create the block, again, to vote on the block and then to finalize the block, this mechanism is inherently decentralized. And it scales up really well as we have more participants in the system. So we're doing great there, kind of check mark. In order to have highly performant decentralized systems, as you see with Solana, which is on maybe one end of the spectrum, where it is blazingly fast, but you know, there's a lot of coordination there. Sometimes the network has issues and has to be rebooted. It's kind of, again, it's a spectrum. It's like, how fast can we go without having elements of centralization creep in? And so I think Algorand is, relatively speaking, at a sweet spot there. So yes, we do have relays, and these relays are responsible for data propagation in the network. So after the VRF is run and the decentralized consensus takes place, those messages are broadcast throughout the network graph by these relays. And so we have hundreds of relays, but they are, of course, whilst they're geographically distributed, and if you looked at them on a map, at a heat map of the world, you would see they're all over the place. And they're in many different data centers. Some are bare metal, some are the cloud providers like AWS, GCP, Azure, etc. I think geographically and metal-wise, quite distributed. Of course, they are run by, some of the universities that are out there, some of the backers of Algorand, the Inc., the foundation, a handful of other players. So, it'd be good to move relays to a place where anyone can run one. And so, as I mentioned to Justin on that thread, his core contention was that relays are centralized because they are permissioned by the foundation. So if you want to run a relay, you have to be kind of given the seal of approval by the foundation. But that's actually not the case. One can run a relay right now, myself, yourself, completely permissionless on any computer you choose to that's connected to the internet. It will come up and it will join the global network of relays. It will be accepted by all the relay peers, and it will start propagating data. What it won't do is be advertised to participation nodes within the network. So all you have to do to use your relay that you just brought up is configure your participation node to point towards it. So I understand that that's a bit of a hurdle technically, but it is very much possible right now to run your own relay, connect it to the rest of the relays in the network, and have it operate in a decentralized way. But I want to go further than that. And so I think we're doing okay with the relays. They are geographically and metal diverse. They could be better in terms of their permission, how permissioned they are. And so I've been upfront about this. And so I told Justin, and I mentioned on the Twitter thread, we're actively in this moment rolling out a public relay program so that it is unpermissioned and anyone can run one. But of course, we have to do that in a careful way. I want to make sure that the network is run properly. And I want to make sure we educate and give people the resources to run these things properly. I don't want folks to start up relays that end up being, for example, not performant or costing them money and they don't understand it. So I think before we roll out that program, and it's actively being designed right now by the foundation, where it will be on permission, we need to give these kind of one-click installs, make it easy, have great documentation. And so we're getting there. So I really think decentralization is a journey. I'm committed to it. I can tell you that. And then last point, on AlgoKit, you might think, well, there's the foundation building the developer tools. Of course, someone's got to do it, but we're going to be doing AlgoKit completely in open source, and anyone is welcome to contribute. And in fact, I hope they do, because I don't want the foundation to have to be the sole maintainer of these developer tools. I want the community to be part of this.
Fantastic answer, John. And I think in that thread, I think some of the things that I put in my article, you said it was a priority for 2023, I believe. Is that still the case?
Absolutely. Yeah,
and you'd said that, that you needed to make it more open, but quite clearly, I think the phrase that I found interesting, you said it's non-trivial, the whole issue.
What we're trying to do with Algorand is pretty special. I've worked in a number of different layer ones. I've worked on Ethereum, I've worked on Cardano, and now I'm working on Algorand. And I can tell you, the protocol is beautiful. It really is really well performant. It's quite elegant, and the design is good. It's not perfect, but it's good. And so, it's fast as hell. It's got block finality, so your transaction is done in 3 seconds. You don't have to wait for confirmations or any of that kind of stuff. And so, with all of these things, you've got like this triangle of decentralization, speed, security, and you're kind of trading off one for the other, like anything in life. You can't have infinite speed, infinite security, etc. And so right, exactly. And so, although we have effectively solved this in the sense that we have good security, good speed, and good decentralization, I want to tweak this. I want to get it to a place where no one can point at the decentralization and nitpick. I want the decentralization to be bulletproof. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we do that in a way where we've architected the network so that we can do that without impacting speed. And so right now, I think we're in the sweet spot, but we can improve.
So I think it's an interesting area, which I've not really thought of in terms of the trilemma being able to manage security, decentralization, and scalability. Mm-hmm. The answer to that is maybe not objective, is it? In terms of there's scales of which you can solve each one of those, and people's preferences as to how decentralized. I've always thought of when people say, "Oh, we've solved the trilemma," that there is a solution, but ultimately, surely you can always be more decentralized. You can always be more scalable. So, on that basis, will we never solve it because it's subjective? So
like it's exactly. I actually think it's really insightful what you just said. I think it is. I didn't actually consider that myself, but you're right. Like it is objective, and so, it's not objective. It's quite subjective, and so like you're right. And what that means basically is that there is not one real truth. There's not one perfect answer to this, and so it is very much a sliding scale. And I think it's very much like vehicles. It's like a Tesla versus a tractor versus a kind of a van, right? It's like does the car look sexy? I mean, yes.
Hmm.
Can it hold a bed? No. You know?
Yeah.
And so, but you know what? We're edging closer to this because, look, ultimately, you know, from a computer science theoretical point of view, as the internet speeds increase, so you can have bigger blocks and you can have you can propagate like 500 megabytes of data in like half a second, this kind of stuff. As computer power increases, whether that's GPUs like the new 4090 RTX, which I'm trying to get my hands on, or whether it's neural processing units that are in our iPhones and stuff, I think it becomes easier and easier to achieve a higher and higher degree of scalability and decentralization. And I think at the heart of all this, though, ultimately, cryptocurrencies, and I'm not even sure I like that term anymore because it's got some kind of negative connotation with it in the media, but like these decentralized assets we're building, they are the intersection of computer science, distributed systems engineering, where we're trying to have highly performant systems that are not located in the same place, applied cryptography, mathematics. And so there are so many different disciplines involved in making these things. It really is an emerging kind of science. And so I feel like we're doing well. If you just look at what we've got now in things like Algorand, Cardano, and others, Ethereum even as well, compared to where these things were 5 years ago, 7 years ago, I mean, it's immense progress. And so I think we'll end up in a place where this stuff is practically solved. And I think we're very close to it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I think cryptocurrencies is kind of an outdated term now given the majority of like Bitcoin. Yeah, I mean, there's an argument there as well. Is it a currency? Is it just a digital gold, etc.? But I could see it there. But in terms of like the Web3 infrastructure that's building the value-based utility on the internet, it doesn't make it a currency, so to speak.
Right.
But one of the things that I'd like to ask you, you've kind of alluded to it already. So you started your career, I believe, working for central banks in Ireland. Then you moved on to Consensus, where a lead architect there, and then director of Cardano architecture before moving to Algorand. What are the key learnings you've had through that journey? And then also, why have you ended up at Algorand rather than staying with any of the other projects?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, my primary degree was in computer engineering. So I was a geeky kid. Like I loved playing with computers and messing about with stuff, reading DOS manuals when I was like 10 or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I worked for Ericsson, and my first job was like a proper software developer, C++. I wasn't very good at it, but it was a good experience. And yeah, you're right. So I did a whole bunch of things. I actually worked as a forex trader for Citibank, and I worked in London on an options desk for a while as well. But yeah, the kind of core part of my work in applied cryptography was at Central Bank of Ireland. Did some work with the ECB on the Euro chain, and then finally I moved to, well, actually I was in Consensus, like you said, where I was really focused on Ethereum and building enterprise grade applications on it. And then I led architecture and applied crypto at IOHK for Cardano, and it was a very interesting experience. And so I think looking back on my career, I think probably the most important thing that got me to where I am is really passion and personal drive to learn. And so I didn't do a PhD after my primary degree. I went and got a regular degree. I didn't do a master's or anything like that. I just basically got my regular degree and then just sat down and just learned. And so I was really self-motivated to get on and understand elliptic curve cryptographic primitives, understand how RSA works, understand the trapdoor functions at the heart of these things, understand the underlying mathematics. And so it was lots and lots of, it was a really slow process. It wasn't like I kind of had any divine moment where I was just educated in this stuff, but I just was really curious. And so I would say if there are folks out there that are really curious about anything, whether it's the human body or medicine or law or technology, follow that curiosity, because I think it leads to a very fulfilling career. And I think it makes what you do for like 10 hours a day, as fun as possible. And then in terms of my move from Cardano to Algorand, I really enjoyed my time at Cardano. It was one of the most technical jobs I've ever had. I learned a ton of stuff there. I was surrounded by brilliant people, as I am now. I guess the opportunity to work on Algorand at a CTO level was just too big to turn down. So like being the chief architect on Cardano was great, but ultimately I wasn't making strategic decisions about the product. And so when I looked at Algorand and I was doing a deep dive into how great it was, and I know that people on the show will probably expect me to say that, but really is objectively good in terms of its speed, its scalability, and its decentralization. And I looked at the emerging technologies they're working on, the post-quantum stuff, the state proofs, all that groovy stuff. I just wanted to be part of that story. I wanted to be part of the leadership team that was shepherding that project towards success. And I felt I had what it took, and it was an opportunity to really step up to that top level. And so I'm glad I took it.
Fantastic. Well, with that, and it was a really great sort of hearing your thinking around the history. Sorry.
Of course, no problem.
Someone's trying to call me on Telegram. One of the things that I was most impressed with when that the conversation you're having with Justin, just to jump back to it slightly, but it's relevant, is around the transparency of the conversation. You were very open, you were very transparent, and the conversation was sometimes quite technical between the two of you in an open forum.
Yeah.
And I think it's just something that I thought was amazing to see, say, a CTO of a project talking very openly, transparently at a high technical level in a public forum in a way that anyone can join in, is very different to traditional industries and traditional technology companies. You're not going to see Microsoft CTO talking in depth about failings that they may have and ways they need to improve and admitting that. Is it and obviously through the whole FTX situation, the obscurity of some of the issues has led to the problems. So do you think that level of transparency is something that you see elsewhere in the industry, or do you think it's something we still need to improve on?
Yeah, I think it's a bit nerve-wracking, right? I mean, like when you're like when you're a senior leader in any company or in any project, it doesn't matter whether how what it is. When you put yourself out there, you make a statement. If you're wrong, it's embarrassing. If you and when you're arguing in a public forum like that, or not arguing, but debating in a public forum like that, it can be like you're putting yourself up. You're sticking your head above the parapet, if you know that expression, and so you can be taken out quite quickly. And so it's a little bit nerve-wracking to kind of do that stuff. But I think there's an honesty in it, and I try not to be reactionary. Of course, human nature is to be reactionary. When someone criticizes something about you, your family, your work, of course, it's easy to fall into this kind of reactionary response. But I try to be objective about these things. So when Justin, not everything he said do I agree with. And part of it, of course, is some rhetoric to try and be a little bit exciting on Twitter. But he has some fair points. And so I think it's much more honest and much more integrous to accept those things and be like, yeah, we can improve these things, than try to pretend like everything's okay. And I think projects that try to pretend like everything is perfect are ultimately not being realistic and are not doing themselves a service. And so,
yeah, I mean,
Sam
tweeted out the day before FTX is fine. I mean, that tweet got deleted.
Yeah.
Just as a prime example of exactly that.
Yeah, I don't delete my tweets, and it's something I really try not to do. I don't think I've done it at all, in fact, because like my attitude is, stick by what you've said, and then just to say, I think there are certain folks in the industry who do go out there and do put themselves up. I think Charles Hoskinson and Cardano does it a lot. He gets on AMAs, he answers hard questions, he responds to people. He does it. I think Vitalik does it in a maybe a very technical way. And so I do want to be a person that people can actually ask a question and get a response from. And I would just ask folks out there to understand that we are really, really trying to push this thing forward, to make sure we make the right steps, fund the right projects, invest in Algorand as much as possible, and really push it forward. And so there are times when not everyone is going to agree. You're not going to please everyone out there at the same time, but we are really trying our best, and we are open to feedback. So if the majority feel like we should be doing things different, I am 100% ready to talk about that and ready to accept that we are not the only people out there. I want to say we, I mean the folks at the foundation, the folks at the Inc. are not the only people with an opinion. And so this is a community project.
That's fantastic to hear, and I think for me that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about the crypto industry, because it's bringing some of the top people from either we want to call it Web 2 or traditional technology into a space where they're pushing for that and they wanting the transparency, and it's a place where maybe the people that, and I'm definitely one of these. I mean, my background's in Web 2 marketing. I owned an agency for years, and I always wanted to run the business more transparently, but I always struggled to do so. And in this space, I mean, it's built for that. And that's what makes me so excited. One of the last things I would like to just get your opinion, if you do have one. So talking about relays as we did earlier on, the current situation on Ethereum's mainnet around their MAV boost relays. I think the last time I checked, it had gone up to 73% of still at 73% of blocks are now enforcing OFAC compliance, mostly through flashbots.
Right.
Is this a big problem in your eyes? I know it's something that could be fixed tomorrow if someone decided to action it. But I've read some really interesting things from all sides in that. Okay, it's not officially censorship at a protocol level yet, and arguably it's not at a protocol level because it's through the relays, not through attestation. And things are still going through, like Tornado Cash transactions still going through. They're just going through slower. But we started at 9% compliant on the 15th of September. We seem to be flattening out now around this 73, 74%.
Yeah.
But if it continues towards 100, like, is this something like one of the things, reason why I wanted to ask you is you are open to the fact of we need to make it more of a priority around our relays so that these sorts of things can't become an issue theoretically. I'm wondering whether is the Ethereum Foundation giving this enough attention or is it being a little bit overblown?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. And no, I don't think it's overblown. I mean, I'm speaking actually from a personal perspective here, not necessarily from the perspective of the foundation, because I've never discussed this with anyone at the foundation. But let me give you my crypto bro, John Wood's view on this. Look, like in the world, of course, we have laws, and laws are the reason we can go to the shops and not get killed. Or like, you can lock your door at night and sleep without someone breaking in. And so laws are good and they're beneficial. So I'm not suggesting that it's okay to have illicit and criminal activity going on chain. I'm not endorsing that. But at the same time, one of the core tenets of the ideals behind what we're trying to do with these decentralized assets is censorship resistance. And so who is to say what should be censored and what not? So going back to what you said, I think that's the beauty of these systems. And so let's say, for example, in Algorand, the relays decide that they're not processing a certain transaction type or from a certain wallet or whatever. And so the whole point and where we need to get to is where, well, you can say, well, I don't care. I'm going to fire up my own relay. I'm going to fire up my own participation node. And so like you're always going to have in a maximally decentralized system, it includes everyone, right? At the tail of the concept, everyone is part of the system. So you're always going to have disagreeing views. You're going to have like the Republican view, or Democrat view. You're going to have this political view, that political view, and you're going to have people who don't think privacy is okay. You do think privacy is okay, and so or are okay with Tornado or not okay with Tornado as an example. And so like you're going to have these polarizations, but the core piece we should be focused on is making sure that the network is participated with enough viewpoints out there that there's the ability to service everyone. And so that's where I think we need to get to, where, okay, country X doesn't like that other country over there. That's okay, because there's participants in country Y that don't really care. There's a large swath of relays that don't like this particular person or entity. Well, that's okay, because we have a small number over here, but there's still enough in the decentralized nature of the network to make sure those transactions go through. So I think contentious issues like this will occur, whether it's OFAC or otherwise. And I think we just need to get the networks to a place where, just like the internet, in fact, the spider web of kind of interactions between all of the participants is decentralized enough and rich enough that there's a route to where you need to get to, even if someone is putting up a government level firewall. And so that'll be my general view. And one last thing I'll say is that I believe privacy is so very important. And so, there's so many different views on this. Should we allow people, to have private encrypted communications that are completely completely without recourse? They could be planning a terror attack, and of course, it's not an easy answer there. Or they could be sharing child sex abuse material, and there's no easy answer there. It sounds like, oh yeah, we should get rid of that cryptography stuff. But at the same time, it's like, is it okay to have a private conversation in your home? Couldn't you be doing terror plotting there? Should we have microphones on the walls? I mean, where do you stop? And so I think privacy is very important. I mean, as an example, you could be in a country where you're trying to get a Quran or a Bible, and maybe that country doesn't allow this, or you could be of a certain sexual orientation, and you're trying to keep that private to yourself, or whatever it may be. And so privacy is a human right, I think. And so I believe we should be getting Algorand and other cryptocurrencies like Monero, which I'm also passionate about, to a place where they are so tangibly private that in fact censorship stops being an issue, because you can't actually understand the source and the destination of a transaction, and therefore everything looks the same. And the same way, by the way, when you're in China and they have a firewall there with the Great Chinese Firewall, you can use a VPN, and that VPN maybe connects you to a US computer, and then you can browse Google or Gmail. And so the reason they don't block that is because they can't distinguish that connection from garbage. They don't know what it is. It's completely encrypted. And so if our transactions are like that on the blockchain, then censorship becomes much less of an issue. So that's the longer term view, the privacy piece. But in the shorter term view, I would like to get the network to a place where it's so decentralized it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point you made, especially around the sort of the privacy in your own home, that like theoretically maybe your crypto wallet should be the same as your own home. It's yours. But I think like a future, like you say, where like maybe people are running nodes for or relays for multiple blockchains on their home router, that it's inbuilt into it, and that everyone has one for whichever ones they select. I could see a future world where that's the case. When you set up your home router and you go, yep, okay, Algorand, Solana, Ethereum, yep, I want to do all those because that's what I work in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Well, John, it's been an absolute pleasure. We've been chatting for a while already now. I thought this was going to be a fun conversation. I've really personally enjoyed it. I think you got some really great insights into the space at this very difficult time. So thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully I'll get to speak to you again in the future. And I wish you all the best with Algorand, and I'll keep an eye out for any. Is there anything that you think that people need to be before we do go? They should keep an eye on other than the dev kits. Anywhere they should go?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and by the way, thank you for having me, Akiba. It's great to have the opportunity to speak to all the people who listen to you. So yeah, Decipher is coming up, and Decipher is like our flagship event for Algorand. It's happening in Dubai. I understand it's a little bit tricky for some people to get to, depending on where you live in the world. But we still have tickets available, and we have I have discounted tickets for folks at this point if they want to come to me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is just John Allen Woods. You can find me on Twitter just under John Woods. It comes up pretty much straight away. If you give me a DM, I'll send you a discount code for the ticket if you can make it. It'd be great to have you there at Decipher. We're going to be talking about the protocol, building on it, and how it's open for business and what it can do for you.
When is that?
It is at the end of this month, November 28th, 29th.
My sister-in-law's wedding. Otherwise, I've had a few people telling me, like Alex from Swissborg and Guy from Coin Bureau have been saying I need to go over to Dubai because I've just moved there. So I've been trying to think of an excuse to get over there. So it's a shame. But say anyone else, say message John on Twitter, and we'll go from there. So John, and for this episode of SlateCast, thank you everyone for watching, and again, thank you again for joining us, John. And that's it for this episode. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.